Hi, this is Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Joel and Adam for another episode of the Horror Express. And tonight we're doing the Re-Animator, a 1985 film directed by Stuart Gordon, and it's based on the H.P. Lovecraft story Herbert West Re-Animator. It stars Jeffery Combs and Bruce Abbott and Barbara Crampton. Before we get into the movie, which we have a lot to say about, I just want to give Joel the floor because I know, Joel, you have a Kickstarter coming up, and I wanted you to give you a couple of moments to just mention that to people.
Oh yeah, sure. We're doing the round 2 Kickstarter for Lone Wolf Fist. First one actually did pretty good. I set the funding goal a little too high on that one because I want to do an offset print run. We're going to do a print on demand now, so it's going to be a much smaller scope, but the same amount of ass kicking. So if you wanted to get a copy of Lone Wolf Fist, PDF or print version, it's happening this coming up December. Yeah. I wish I had a better ending than
That's fine. That's fine. But it's very much in line with what we're going to be talking about tonight. It's a different genre, but it's kind of the same. There's similarity, I think, in terms of the
extremely
tone.
Pulp.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So Re-Animator came out in 1985. It's based on the H.P. Lovecraft story, and it's about a guy who has this thing called the reagent, which is this like neon green liquid that he injects into the brains of dead patients and revives them, but they become more like uncontrollable lunatic zombies than anything else, except in a few cases, which we'll talk about. And it's also kind of set against like a weird love triangle involving a young doctor who serves as sort of the Igor of the story, and sort of the old stuffy doctor who's kind of like an elite New England type guy, and the Barbara Crampton character. And it all tightly fits together. I was amazed rewatching it just how, I mean, it's only like 128 minutes or something like. It's a really short movie. Yeah. But I think that works in its favor because you end up with this tightly edited story that like one scene flows in the next, and I rewatched it 3 times for this show. And the thing I kept noticing was, wow, the cat scene came this early, and then right after the cat scene is this scene, and like every scene that has to happen happens in sequence from another essential scene. There's not really any there's no fat to this movie. I feel like it has a lot of, it's very efficient in its storytelling, and it's, I don't know, very sharp and clever. And I think Jeffrey Combs as Herbert West is I don't know, he's just really good in this role.
Yeah. This is the perfect casting. So like he devours this role. Because he's both over the top and utterly deadpan in a way I've never seen an actor do before or since.
I want to get into your reactions, but just since we've gone into this territory, what works for me is he's impatient. He's like dedicated to this one task and hyper focused about it. But he's like, I don't know, I had a teacher in 2nd grade named Mr. Woolley, and he's like exactly like Mr. Woolley. There's like this streak of anger beneath the surface.
This impatience with everyone around him at all times.
Yeah, and just this total lack of regard for the context of every, like something really. It's not the right moment to be reanimating a dead body, but he's so hell-bent on this task that he's willing to risk everything to make the attempt at that time when he shouldn't be doing it. It's that kind of a thing.
There's something too that's just interesting about him simultaneously being utterly immoral, but at the same time he's judgmental and there's some kind of weird alien principles to him, like that. It's just fascinating. He's just this really just endlessly entertaining character.
He has a morality, I think.
Yeah,
I feel like
he has a purely academic morality though, because he hates plagiarism.
Yeah,
he hates that more than any evil that he encounters, is just not being a good scientist.
Yeah. And he cares about his own reputation, even though he doesn't care about it in a lot of ways. Like, he doesn't care if you think he's a murderer, or that you think that he's rude, or too blunt, or if he killed your cat, but he cares that he is attached to this breakthrough in science, because when the Dr. Hill character basically says, "I'm going to take your discovery," you get that close up of his eyes and he's tearing up, like he's getting all emotional. That's like the one time you see him show that kind of an emotion. But yeah, I think he does, and also he never hurt. I mean, he does things indirectly that hurt him, but he never hurts the Dan Kane character. Do you know what I mean? He seems to, like, throughout,
aside from kill his cat.
No, that's why I said indirectly.
Emotional pain.
No, it's indirectly. And we should get into the question later. Did he kill the cat? Did he not kill the cat? But I think there's a lot of evidence that he did, and we could, for this moment of the discussion, I think we can assume that.
Cat dead. Details later.
Yeah, but
his sense of humor, the other thing about that character, just got this really biting sense of humor, and also the scorn he has for Dr. Hill and his attraction to Barbara Crampton's character too. Just the way he just is amused at that. It's so. Yeah, everything about this character. There's just so much depth to it for just this schlock movie we're reviewing. It's so perfect.
Well, he does have lines. You know, he has these, and I don't know how you could map them out. But like also at the lecture when he takes umbrage at the doctor poisoning the minds of these, you know, he obviously cares about how those students are being impacted. So
his repeated pencil breaking is just one of the funniest things in a movie ever. The second time he breaks that pen, I'm just like,
well, and Dr. Hill's line of, you know, Mr. West, I suggest you get yourself a pen. You know? But yeah, so why don't? Well, I'm sure we'll get back into Herbert West and his character and the performance, but
yeah.
How you guys feel about this movie, and was this your first time seeing it? When was your first time seeing it?
Let me go first this time. I haven't been first on at least since last time. I'm trying to think. This is not the first time I saw it. This is, let me see. I think it's only the second time though, because I saw this after actually avoiding the movie for a long time. Like, I got into Lovecraft back when I first started getting into like D&D and role-playing games. Like, it kind of went on the tails of learning stuff like Call of Cthulhu, and it's referenced a lot in old World of Darkness stuff. And I had some friends who were like, oh man, you got to read H.P. Lovecraft. And I started with the Mountains of Madness, and so that's kind of the entry drug to Lovecraft that will make you a huge Lovecraft snob. Because I think Call of Cthulhu was a touch pulpier, and a lot of his stuff, like even Herbert West Re-Animator, is a little bit unusual for Lovecraft.
Yeah,
like it's a lot pulpier in a way that's kind of out of character for him.
He didn't like writing it, from what I heard. He did it for the money. Basically, it was intended as a parody of Frankenstein, and he was under constraints that he didn't like.
Sure, and there are like elements to it that are like actually kind of absurd, and it's hard to read Lovecraft sometimes, but I want to say humorous, and I don't mean read as in like read, I mean read as in comprehend. It shouldn't surprise anyone, but I was a Lovecraft snob is the basic line of this, and so I avoided this movie for a long time because its reputation as not really being this great inheritor of the Lovecraft legacy. And then I sort of just kind of got older and softened a lot about that kind of purism. And I went to see it. I think it was on Netflix. It's just at one point I was like, oh, I never saw this movie. I'm going to watch it. And I instantaneously loved it. I think Combs, again, going back to that guy, like, it's not that he carries the movie, because everyone puts in a great, strong performance in this movie, and there's really good practical effects. And, like, but man, he really charms you into watching this whole movie. And I'm glad I did, because... And, like, actually rewatching it this time is, again, I think only the second time I've ever seen it. It hits all the beats that the original short stories did. Because I think there was actually several stories that were strung together.
It was chapters. It was like 5 chapters.
Yeah. And I think they were published uniquely as chapters. And then they made a broader story.
It was serialized in a magazine, I think.
Yeah. That's the term I'm groping for. Thank you, Adam.
And it was, and the plot, and actually, if you watch the sequels, they kind of bring in some more of the material, so you get all of the beats. Like some of the stuff that unfolds happens a little differently here, and they miss the whole part of them going to war and all that stuff. But so there are things missing. But
well, right, the details are missing, but like the structural beats are all almost identical, and it's really impressive.
Yeah.
They even keep some of the goofier parts of the story, like when the headless corpse puts on a plastic head.
Well, and this is a horror comedy, we should say, so that Adam, what was your reaction to the movie?
Well, I will say, first of all, I agree with everything everyone said so far. And I mean, as far as the performances in here, one of the things, it hasn't come with Puppet Master, actually. I commented during the Puppet Master review how it was really good pulp acting.
Yeah.
Everyone was these heightened kind of pulpy characters. This movie has that. And it's also, I mean, it's perfectly 80s in a way too. I mean, like the Dean, he is just the 80s
Yeah.
college movie Dean. It's like he just could have wandered in from the set of some 80s college comedy, that was going on. You're just dealing with the fraternity that
Yeah.
was getting out of hand, and
You know what
you
happens to
know,
him? He goes from being the dean to being Rodney Dangerfield by the end of the movie. That's like the span of his
his
character.
arc.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everyone is dead perfect. I mean, like the Bruce Abbott is Dan Kane, who's the everyman kind of
Yeah.
ordinary character. It's like he's really good at doing that. It's
And
like
he
it's
br-
easy to kind of overlook him. But he just kind of nails that. Barbara Crampton's
yeah.
great. It's just, and I mean, it's just, yeah. Every single person in this movie is just pitch perfect at doing this kind of B movie
Mm.
acting, and yeah, I really. Once again, you did ask the question, when did we first see this movie? Was the first time? This is not the first time. I will go into my history with it. I saw it back shortly after it came out, kind of around the time it would have first hit videotape. I rented it, and I'd recently started playing Call of Cthulhu, and I don't think I'd actually read any Lovecraft. I actually played the RPG before I ever read any Lovecraft. A friend of mine picked it up and he ran it, and I was like,
Mm.
wow, this is amazing. So I hadn't acquired the snobbery about Lovecraft yet, but yeah, I mean, obviously tonally this is not a lot like Lovecraft, but I'll go out on a limb and say it's not as completely far off from Lovecraft as I think some other things are, just because there is kind of a weird cosmic nihilism to it that is actually in tone. Like I said, I don't think Lovecraft would appreciate the sexual content and graphic violence to an extent, but it's not it's not totally philosophically that far from something that could happen in the Lovecraftian universe. So, you
Yeah.
know, but yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't seen this movie since probably the early 90s, and it completely held up for me. It just, yeah, it is just a fast, quick, well-paced movie.
Yeah, I think it's a great movie. I first saw it in I don't know how old I was. I must have been in second or third grade because it came out in '85, and I saw it on video at my friend
Yeah.
Jason's house like as soon as it came out. And again, I think there was more of a delay back then when things came. Like there was often like a 9 month waiting period
Hmm.
before something would come out. So maybe it was closer to '86. I don't know, but it had a profound impact on me. I think because number one, I was in second or third grade when I would have
Yeah.
seen it. I was young.
Yeah.
But number two, it was the first. I think it was the first like horror comedy that I had really seen, and it was also, and I was probably no, I was probably third or fourth grade, and it was also there was something very disturbing to me about the scene with the head and the cunnilingus scene. That was one that stuck out in my head, but also the scene where the bowels explode from the
Yeah.
body and
Yeah.
and again in the sequel we find out he doesn't die, but in this it looks like he dies, and I assumed for ages he died. And then the fact that Barbara Crampton's character dies at the end too, I found like you said, there is like a nihilism running through the movie,
Yeah.
but it also, because I wasn't accustomed to horror comedy, it was a little bit like being in the room with sociopaths for the first time, because I was watching all this horrific stuff happen, but
Yeah.
there was a comedic tone to it, and there was also this just flagrant disregard of like any level of decency that you would expect, where like the head scene, where it's like, like, well, and so you got you got the sense that and it was done in a way that the filmmakers had command of what they were doing, but the result of watching it as a kid was just like, what am I watching? What is going on? And so it had a really big impact on me, and it became something that me and my group would watch a lot. Like we would rent it all the time and watch it. And I think largely for the scene with like the head and the bowels. Those are like the two big beats that everybody kind of reacted to. But I hadn't seen it in a long time. I probably hadn't seen it like you since the '90s at least, and
Yeah.
it really does hold up. In fact, I wasn't aware that it had such a stellar reputation. I always thought of it as like a schlocky, goofy B movie, and it's apparently
That's
got
the thing. All the respected critics of the time, like Ebert and Janet Maslin, and like all of those big critics loved this movie, which is
which
kind
I
of
had no
amazing.
idea. I had no
Yeah.
idea about that, and so I was surprised to find that out. I was also surprised at, how good of a movie it was, because I just remembered the really outrageous aspects to it. I didn't remember how tightly woven it was. How just for the kind of movie, it's like a masterful B movie is sort of what it is. It's like it's definitely it's doing B movie stuff, but it's doing it in a way that's just so much better than normal. Which maybe that's also why it stuck with me all these years. Where, so yeah, I thought it was it's a terrific film. And also, I had when I saw it, I didn't know who Lovecraft was. I didn't even know it was a Lovecraft story until ages later. Like it never, and I read Lovecraft, but I never came across the Re-Animator until like a few years ago. You know what I mean? And I don't think I even read it properly until like a year. Like very recently. So, it's it's a really good movie, and I don't know what I guess we should take this by subject. Why don't we tackle the most controversial thing first? The music. Because the music's great. The music really sets the stage for the movie. I feel like it captures the insanity of Herbert. Like I can imagine all of the melody being like the energy driving Herbert West's thoughts as he's frantically trying to reanimate these corpses. Do you know what I mean? It just works with what's going on. But obviously it's really close to the music from Psycho, and a lot of people have commented on that. This is not anything that we're observing. This is something that it's a long discussion, and most people, I think, and Adam, I think you're muted, by the way.
Yeah, I was saying it's obvious. There's there's no question about it that it's
So I guess the first question is this a ripoff of Psycho? And if so, does it still work once you recognize it? Like, if that's the case, like, does that take away from it, or is it really not a problem?
It's definitely noticeable. I don't know. I liked the music in Psycho. I still liked it here. I mean, it's pretty derivative. I guess you could call it a tribute or like a remix or something, but like, I don't know. Maybe it's the era I was born in. I don't really care. Like, as long as the music works, that's a lot more important to me than is it original.
The composer says that it's an homage, and I think that's where the debate lies. Is this an homage, or is this a ripoff?
I mean, it's functionally identical, so I wouldn't call this an homage. I would definitely call this a ripoff if I were going to go into that territory.
But yeah, it works though. I mean,
I'm not saying that it wasn't a bad ripoff.
No, I agree. I'm saying I never had a problem with it. I mean, the music in this is really effective. I mean, that just basically the beginning scene where the I gave him life and it goes into the theme music and the credits start rolling. It's like, that is just pitch perfect.
Yeah.
It absolutely works at that moment. You're like, yeah, you're ready for the roller coaster ride of this movie at that point. So I don't know. I mean, people can get into the legal arguments of that if they want to, but no, the music's effective.
Well, for me, it kind of occupies that same space where, like the Ghostbusters theme, where people draw lines of comparison between that and that one. What was it, Huey Lewis song?
Yeah.
But like those songs feel very different to me, and they land very differently, and kind of similar to this. Like, this is sort of used in the same way to give us sort of like an energy and a forward propulsion to what's going on. But I feel like the manic element of it is more apparent here, whereas in Psycho, it's more about the driving to the next plot point element that comes out in it. So having been a fan of both movies and the score in both movies, even though, again, they're functionally identical, you note different aspects of them because of what you're watching to accompany them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also, I mean, as a fan of wuxia movies where they often just take music from other films, I think it's fine if you just take music, it's fine because it can be the right sound for what you need. In this case, I feel like I don't. I mean, I think I tried listening to them back to back. It's actually really hard to just listen back to back and say, is it a, And then I would almost need to see the notes, or I would need to play it on an instrument and figure out where the differences actually are. But I will say this: I think that this is an improvement on the Psycho score. I think that this is actually better than the original Psycho score because it's tighter. I think that there's a lot of meandering and drift in the Psycho score and the lack of tightness, and this brings it all in. I think this is just generally more effective. I do think it's derivative. I think he gets
a lot of angry Bernard Herrmann fans writing in here.
Well, he gets really close up to the line. Like it's so
dear Ath Faitheth.
I think on a regular listen, they're pretty indistinguishable. Do you know what I mean? But I just think in terms of if you listen to them back to back, they are really close, and it looks like he's getting up to the line of going beyond homage. But I think he's also improving what he's working with. You know what I mean? And I think for the purposes of the Re-Animator, it works beautifully.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the original Psycho score would have worked as well. Do you know what I mean? I think what he did to it makes it work better. So,
yeah, it made it more frenetic or something. And I agree with you. It really highlights the madness of Herbert as it goes through. The particular flavor of madness that he has,
So that's, and again, people can judge for themselves. You can go on to YouTube and I'm sure there's like back-to-back versions of the soundtracks. How do you guys think it works as an adaptation of the Lovecraft material? I know we kind of covered that already, but do you think it's a good version of the story? I mean, I would say it absolutely probably is better than the source material. Do you know what I mean?
It is. Yeah, it's better than the source. Yeah, I mean, this particular story, I mean, it's not a great Lovecraft story in the first place. So
I like the story. I kind of like it better than a lot of his other stories, to be honest.
It's a bit more approachable, yeah.
Yeah, it's more approachable. Like, because sometimes Lovecraft's big issue is he's hard to read sometimes. Do you know what I mean? Because, and this one is like, you will not lose track of this plot because he repeats the plot at the beginning of each chapter because it's recapped for the serialization. And it's just a lot more structured and I don't know. I like it.
This is maybe
I should clarify
professional work. So
yeah, I was gonna say, and I should clarify when I say it's not a great work. I mean from the standpoint that it's not something like At the Mountains of Madness where he's aspiring to something greater. It's like it's just a pulpy story he wrote. It's not,
and it doesn't get deep into the themes that he's known for either.
So in either direction, and it doesn't get into the themes that he's not super well known for. Like one of my favorite Lovecraft stories is Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, which is a bright and hopeful story of strange and alien beauty, and like notably Nyarlathotep gets outwitted and beaten by the protagonist of that one. So like he's not
that's his homage. That's Lovecraft doing his homage to Lord Dunsany too. So that's Lovecraft.
That explains a lot.
Yeah. It's like for people that play the RPG, it's like obviously the RPG tried to enmesh that into the Lovecraftian universe, but really it's an entirely different thing Lovecraft is doing. It's like a whole separate subgenre of his writing.
But yeah, I do think though the movie is definitely better. I mean, it obviously it's more known. Do you know what I mean? Like most people haven't read the original story, I think, but a lot of people know the movie. And, And I think there's a reason for it. It's not just because it's old, because I mean, people know Lovecraft. Lovecraft's famous, but for some reason, that story does not get the traction that.
I think it's worth mentioning that Lovecraft wasn't that famous when this movie came out, too. It's like Lovecraft is almost meme-like at this point as something you can kind of bring up, and even people that haven't read him kind of have a familiarity. It's like at this point, until, like I said, the first time my friend broke out Call of Cthulhu at probably 85 or 86, whatever it was, none of us knew who this guy was. It was
I never encountered him out of gaming circles, and then that was my first little dose of Lovecraft.
I encountered him from the obituary cover that had the same art that they used for the H.P. Lovecraft books, and through the Ravenloft book, because in Ravenloft they mention Lovecraft a lot. And so those were my big. I think those are probably my big introductions to Lovecraft. And then
Yeah, and Ravenloft was like that was
it wasn't
later.
really Lovecraftian, but like
Oh
he
no,
had
I'm
a
saying
lot.
time period wise. I'm saying, you would have encountered that later, I'm assuming, right? Or
I don't remember. Ravenloft, the box set I think came out in 1990 or 91. And that's
yeah, yeah.
probably when I was starting to get into Lovecraft, I would imagine, because
I would
that's when
say
I
I
was
would
in high
say that the
school.
early 90s was when Lovecraft kind of started to get wider
Okay.
wider circulation in kind of geek circles, and then kind of extended beyond
Okay.
that, because now you kind of start. I mean, I feel like this movie was kind of great, even though it's so un-Lovecraftian in a lot of ways. I think this movie is really kind of what kickstarted the
Hmm.
familiarity with the name, and that is, I think the movie was sometimes called H.P. Lovecraft's Re-Animator on the cover
Okay.
of the video cassette.
And
So it
then,
was like,
and obviously the director did another Lovecraft story like a year
yeah,
later too. So,
yeah.
um, so yeah. So, why don't we talk about some of the characters? Then we can get into some of the other things. We've
Mhm.
already talked about Herbert West. So, do we have anything else to say about him, or are we done discussing Herbert West as a character?
Oh,
I think we could probably talk about him a whole lot. Are there any highlights or specific scenes? Because for me, I really wanted to point out, like going back to his weird, like academic achievement based morality, when he decapitates the professor, the only thing he does to insult him after this lifetime of evil this guy has done has been like, "You're a plagiarist." Then he decapitates him.
Yeah.
Like that's the
He
one
does. Well,
stinger
also
that he really
he
can't
has a.
forgive.
I love how he has a really efficient way of speaking. He doesn't even say you are a plagiarist. He says plagiarist. It's
Oh,
like
that's
the
right.
cat
Yeah.
dead details later memo. It's all very precise and efficient. Everything about him is neat and organized in the way he delivers it. And yeah,
And he gets into such messes.
I mean that
yeah.
scene is obviously famous, and that scene kind of I think you can really get a lot about his character in that scene, because that is the scene again that I mentioned with the eye watering, where you see that like, I mean, he looks vulnerable in that scene, and then he kills somebody. Do you know what I mean? And I
Yeah,
think that's his
that's the
first murder, right?
um
Well,
Well, that
it's
we
hard to
know of.
say. It's
I
hard
mean,
to
yeah,
say
we don't know
what's
what happened
happened
with
in his
Gruber. It
past.
depends on what went down with
It's his
Gruber.
first on-screen murder.
Yeah,
We'll go with that.
yeah,
yeah,
But
okay.
but I do like his I do like how put out he is there, that she's gone into his room too. It's like, you killed the cat.
yeah,
It's like, you went into my room,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
boom,
like that
back
was
in
the
your
line.
face.
Well, one thing I
That's
want to get
equally as
into,
bad.
he seems to have a habit of lying a lot. Like the
Yeah.
thing about the cat. There's a few other, like later on when he's trying to persuade Dan like why he had to kill Dr. Hill, and Dan is initially like upset at him, but then he says, but he wanted to make you disappear too. He tries to, and I don't
Is
think
that a
that
lie though that he wanted to make him
I
disappear? I'm trying
I don't
to.
well I think it's an assumption he might have made, but I don't think that we ever actually did we get confirmation that
I don't know. That's why I'm literally asking the question. I'm
I
not. I'm
I
because the things obviously he does want Dan to disappear
yeah
because he's got designs on
I
on his girlfriend.
I
But
think it's a reasonable conclusion, and maybe there was something in that file that I didn't see. Like maybe there was like a picture of Dan with like an X through his face or something. But
I guess to support your argument that he is lying, I don't think at this point in the movie, he's later in the movie is the point where he's amused at the fact that the doctor has this crush on the girl. I think I don't think we
yeah,
have or have we? I don't know. I'm trying to remember now.
he
The sequence of
You
events is a
watched it
little
three
bit cloudy.
times.
so
Huh?
wait, I think he is amused by it in that scene. I think because I think that's when Dan tells him about the folder. Because he
Oh,
says he
okay.
wanted you to disappear too, and then he says, "Oh, that's why he did this," and he has.
Okay.
I could be
Okay.
wrong, but I think that's how it goes down. I think another thing about his character too is he's actually kind of smooth. Like he's actually a very charming guy, even though he's like a little bit belligerent and like mean. I feel like Herbert West, if he wasn't dedicated to reanimating dead tissue, could have become a ladies' man or could have become a great public speaker. Do you know what I mean? It's just that he chose not to be those things. Do you know, like because he has these suave moments where he deflects what could be a catastrophic exchange. Do you know what I mean? Where like, you killed my cat. And he's like, "Oh no, I didn't kill your cat. What was I going to do? Send you a memo?" And he has all these answers for every it's actually very smooth and very disarming. I find, and there are quite a few scenes like that.
Yeah, he's I mean, yeah, obviously he is very quick on his feet. So yeah, like you say, he is a very deceptive person and quick to kind of put people off guard. He kind of goes on the attack immediately when someone questions him on something.
But he also knows, he like understands people. Like when he's trying to convince him to reanimate the dean, and it's not work. Like he's and Dan's obsessed with the details he should be obsessed with. The dean is dead, and and Herbert is still obsessed with reanimating him. He says, we can bring him back to life. Do you know what I mean? He knows just what to say to persuade him, and it's actually convincing, because it's like, well, that would solve my problem. If he were to come back to life, I won't be charged with murder potentially. And it'll assuage any.
Won't hate me for killing her father.
Okay, yeah. He does lie in that scene though, because Herbert's in charge of all the lies, and the security guard shows up. He's like, okay, here's the lie sequence of events that happened, and he's over in the but there is some smooth, quick lies.
He weaves a whole book of lies in that scene, but the thing is,
he does so with like immediacy and with conviction.
Yes,
and it completely holds together.
He looks sincere as he's doing. It's always very sincere the way it's delivered, and so I don't know. I just feel like there's like another level to his character of that. He's meant to be this nerdy scientist character that doesn't really care for social norms and stuff, but he's obviously aware enough of them that he can capitalize on them when he needs to persuade people. So it's like he just chooses to bulldoze over these social lines rather.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing too, because like we have his complete disregard, like complete amusement at the doctor having this crush on this co-ed, and he just seems to have like a complete disregard for human sexuality entirely. Which brings us around to people going, is this Lovecraftian? Because obviously, people who get upset about this movie are like, oh, there's all this sex in it, and there's like absolutely no romance or sex of any kind anywhere in Lovecraft's work, to the point where it's something people remark upon. So you almost have to wonder if that is a almost deliberate trait they kind of threw in there as a kind of a Lovecraft tie-in.
It could be, and I think in the sequels, I feel like, well, I don't know, it gets more complicated, I think, in the sequels, but those are
I haven't seen the sequels, so I'm
I haven't seen the sequels either, but I did see From Beyond, and I think in both cases that kind of like trashy, pulpy, hypersexualized element is something that like isn't really true to Lovecraft's style.
Oh, it's totally untrue to Lovecraft. I'm just saying having the personality trait on West is all I'm saying. Yeah, no, the tone of the movies is.
Though I will say, in From Beyond, that totally worked. The main guy, the bad guy, who sort of is like a Ricardo Montalban type person. You know what I mean? Like
really
he's got like I don't remember exactly, but I feel like he was wearing some kind of like
smoking jacket thing.
Yeah, something like that, like definitely a Hugh Hefner type outfit. Hugh
Hefner.
But anyways. But oddly enough, the Jeffrey Combs character in that movie kind of had a similar type of like his sex, like there was definitely a weird sexuality thing going on with his character in that one, but it was kind of similar to here, where it was like there was massive repression going on, or do you know what I mean? Like,
the feeling of there being something wrong, and that coming out in terms of this kind of like, not even like repressed, but almost like an anesthetized sexuality in terms of Herbert in this movie. Like that is pretty uniquely Lovecraftian. I think you might be onto something.
Well, because he's making life. He's making life, right? So like it definitely is like an outlet for that. And this is a smart movie, so I think we can assume it's aware.
It is so weirdly smart for how dumb it allows itself to act.
That's one of the things that's so great about it, Jerry. It's like it's not afraid to like, to just be a normal fun movie, but it also is operating on a high level, and it's a really tight...
it's surprisingly cerebral, and a lot of the jokes and humor are operating on this kind of like removed level that is really charming on a review. So
now, what about the we should talk about the Dr. Hill character, because
Mhm.
he number one, the performance is really good too. Like that's a really he had Herbert West has a lot of good lines, and Dr. Hill has the other good lines, I think, in this movie. And
Yeah.
a lot of people have commented. I think Red Letter Media probably mentioned this, and I know I've seen it elsewhere. He really looks a lot like John Kerry, and he sounds a lot like John Kerry, and I think that's pretty on point.
I noticed that watching it this time myself.
Which actually works, given that he's supposed to be from an elite New England university and all this stuff.
Yeah.
It makes sense. But what did you think of the character? What did you think of the performance and the, how he functioned as a villain?
That was a delicious performance. I mean, first of all, it was just a joy to watch that dude act. But as far as does it works? Does it works? Listen to me. Does it work? Yeah, it really works. Both in terms of it being kind of pulp and over the top and almost cartoonish in how villainous and vain and cruel and lascivious and weird the bad guy is, but also it works structurally in that weird cerebral level because he's sort of the opposite of Herbert West and becomes a duo protagonist is a deuteragonist. What's a duo antagonist? A duo antagonist? Is that how you would say that? It's a secondary antagonist because Herbert himself is a bad guy. And then this guy's a bad guy to the bad guy, but also just a bad guy.
Well, but
he's
Herbert West is kind of the star of the movie, isn't he? I know we're supposed to associate ourselves with Dan, but Herbert's the main.
Dan really is kind of the sidekick. As you referred to him as the Did you refer to him as
he's
the
Igor? And in the book,
he
was the narrator in the original story. Basically, I don't know if he was named Dan, but he was but and I think I've even heard that he actually is that technically that character might be the first Igor-like character in the Frankenstein story. In terms of that might be where they got the idea. Okay. I don't know. I've heard somebody mention.
Well, actually, that might be accurate because there was no Igor in actual Frankenstein, but there absolutely was an Igor or an Igor archetype in that, and it's a pretty old story. Huh.
Yeah.
And again, it's somebody else's idea. It was on some review I saw online.
Well, whosoever they are clever, and that was a really good parallel to draw.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I forget where we were going with all that. But I might have.
I kind of lost my.
But anyways, the Dr. Hill character. Dr. Hill. We're talking about
Dr. Hill. Yeah.
We're also excited about this movie. We're just talking over each other.
But Dr. Hill, though, I have to say, David Gale, the actor, it's I had to go to Wikipedia to look him up. I'm what else was he in? And it's he's got such a small career of movies I've never heard of. And I was wow, okay, he never did anything else of note that I can find aside from Re-Animator movies, which was a surprise to me. I was he seems like someone who could have had a bigger career.
I was surprised too because I was I feel like I've seen him in other movies, but I haven't, and and he's so
obviously
good.
It's something I saw back in the mid '80s, so he's probably I was probably remembering him from this movie as a memorable thing more than anything else.
And he does kind of look like some other actors that played similar types of roles, which maybe that's why he didn't get those roles. I don't know, but
could be. Yeah.
But yeah, I thought he was tremendously good, and I don't know, I just loved. I love the whole thing with the body, the way the body is amped.
Oh my God.
It's sort of it's like a Two Stooges type thing where the head is the brain and the body is the slapstick humor, and also just how delicious. Even from he's already evil before he becomes the bad guy in the movie, right? He's already lobotomizing his colleague in order to steal somebody's idea. Do you know what I mean?
He's got keeping creepy files on college girls too.
Yeah, no, he's a bad guy. Coming back from the dead just externalizes his already horrible evil. So
and then just the drooling creepiness, when with the head scene, is just But the enthusiasm of that performance is so him and Barbara Crampton together really work in that scene because I think. If there was any awkwardness, it would really show. Do you know what I mean? That could have come off in a different way with different actors.
It's always got to be a delicate scene, shooting something like that. But hats off to Barbara Cranston. She acted to the hilt in that scene, and you really bought the performance.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's clear they were professional and capable, and it made the scene a lot more watchable as a result because it's some dark subject matter.
And what I've heard I heard this from the Red Letter Media account, and I heard it on another one. Apparently, I don't know if this is true because I wasn't able to look it up and confirm it, but his wife divorced him over that scene. Like his wife was present, and she stood up and objected and said, "Is this what you do for a living?" And apparently they were divorced soon after that, and people say that's why. I don't know, so maybe that's also why we don't see him in those kind of roles.
He got remarried, and he's like, "I never want you to watch any of my movies. I'm just going to act like I'm not an actor." But because he was a great actor, he got away with it.
So, so do any other characters? Obviously, the Megan Halsey character is. She's the girlfriend, but I think she's good in this. I think that she does a tremendous job, and she's like
it's a bit of a functional role, but there's a lot of scenes like that when we were mentioning the head scene that demand a lot of an actress, and man, she nails every single scene that she's in. So I gotta admit.
It's just like kind of fairly dramatic scenes, like the scene where she talks to Dan after her father's been reanimated, and she's like, it's like she does well with that. I mean, that's a pretty meaty scene there too. It's
who's also kind of an unsung hero of this is, I think his name was Mace, the security guard. Was his name
security
Mace?
guard? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's something about that guy. Like he's operating in the background a lot of time, but he's really important for making that place believable. And he just adds this tone, this because he obviously doesn't really care about his job that much. He kind of wants to, he wants to look at nudie magazines and go on lunch breaks. Like that's all we ever really, see him doing.
Yeah.
But
you're gonna be here. Okay, great. I don't need to be watching the place, so I'm gonna take off for a bit. See ya.
But it's done in such a personable way that you feel like he's your friend. Do you know what I mean? There's like a
There's a believability to the acting of that part, and he's a delight in every scene that he's in, and especially again because it's one of those more or less functional roles that's just kind of there for a comedic beat, and then at the end of the movie when things go completely off the rails, he's got a lot that's put on his shoulders to make him a believable human character still, and he still pulls it off.
And you need to believe that people are actually sneaking in and out of this. This morgue. And with that character in place, you're like, I get why people are able to sneak in and out of the morgue so often, because they establish that he's he's got these other things that he's tending to, and so he's not really paying as much attention to.
Well, exactly. They give you scenes early in the movie of Dan going in and out of the morgue, so it doesn't seem a weird thing. It's like, yep, he's in and out of there all the time.
The first line from the security guard is that it was like, why would you even need me? I'm just no one's getting out of here. Who'd want to come down? I'm going to go take a lunch. It's perfect.
Which is an odd line, because I was thinking about that. I was like, well, do they have security guards at morgues? I don't know. And I guess it would be something you might need, because there probably are people that try to steal bodies for a variety of purposes.
Too, I mean, bodies can be evidence in a crime, too. Yeah. So, I mean, it makes sense to have some kind of security. So...
But he is kind of like...
It's also believable that the guard would not have his whole life dedicated around being the perfect security guard. So
I thought it worked. Now, what about Dr. Herod? She's not really a big role, but she has a presence. The doctor who's kind of in charge of Dan at the beginning of the movie.
Oh yeah,
she's in From Beyond as well.
From Beyond too. I think a bigger role in that, if I recall.
Yeah, she gets her brain eaten out through her eye, I think. And
but I think she was perfect. I like the fact she is just kind of hard on him at the beginning of the movie. I like the way she kind of has a touch of sympathy in the final scene too. Yeah. It's a really subtle but nice touch to that performance. Could be easy just to be, I'm the hard ass doctor and that's it. But she kind of gives it just that little extra note that makes it a human being.
She's got an edge to her. Like you're a little bit afraid of her. Do you know what I mean? There's something about it that makes you a little bit afraid, which I like.
Yeah.
And I guess that leaves the dean, who we've kind of already talked about. And again, my only note on him is I basically said what you said. He's like the dean from a standard 80s movie, but then he become like, by the time he's in that straitjacket, he really does look like a more of a Rodney Dangerfield type character. And I think it's a striking, it's a really weird juxtaposition whenever if you watch it again and you see him in the beginning of the movie and you know he's going to that destination. It's just like they couldn't be more opposite. But also the thing I like about his character is just how he starts out as like almost like the best future father-in-law in the world, and then becomes the worst future father-in-law in the world early on in the film. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I have to say, if the movie could have done one thing a little better, it's like there was never a particularly good reason for him to be like, no one, it's like, okay, Dan is presented early in the movie as he's this, really great medical student. I mean, I get him being, I can see him being like restrictive about curfew hours or something, but just like, just he's like, why does he? I felt like maybe there should have been a little more groundwork on why he was so.
I kind of agree. But I also think they did do some of that, like they established that he's really puritanical, right? Like the daughter says, he's the last living Puritan, and that's obviously the issue. And when he said, and the moment when he actually starts to get angry, I think in that scene, he was already angry, but when he really goes over the line is when he says, and your daughter saw it as well, and she knows about the experiment. And he's like, you involving Meg in your insanity? But also that kind of suggests that Meg was maybe doing something with him. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just, I think it plants the idea that there might have been shenanigans going on that the father would be displeased with. Do you know what I mean? Because didn't it happen in the middle of the night, or they were?
Well, I'm just saying, like, even before that, I mean, there's, like I said, it's kind of set up that he's already had this, you can't date my daughter thing before that, and I don't know, but it's also not a big deal. It's just a minor note that kind of struck me.
But no, I do agree with you in that, like, I had to kind of think about it too, to like I feel like the reasons are there if you search for them, but it's not as clear as a lot of the other. Everything else in the movie is very clear, and that one you're kind of like, why does he kind of go from being like, hey, my future son-in-law is a great student, to, you will not date my daughter, you are expelled, and your student loan is like, he goes nuclear
like
on
nobody's business. But I mean, like, it's not unusual or completely like beyond believability that someone would go nuclear if like a circumstance as extreme as the one he encountered happened, and like, that's the thing. Granted, there should have probably been a little more groundwork into that sort of puritanical dimension, but like, it's not the biggest part of this movie, and like, this movie's got a lot to lift, so I can see why they sort of deprioritized it. It's a legitimate complaint, but
maybe it was the nonsense.
I'll admit myself it's minor, but we're doing a podcast.
I think what Adam's talking about is fair, though, because I also thought that when he immediately, we never really see him take a turn on Herbert West either, because he's the one who introduces Herbert West, so you assume, he's like happy to have this guy as a new student, and Herbert is walking around like he runs the place, so it seems like he's okay with him, and then suddenly being associated with Herbert West is this bad thing. I mean, because basically, I kind of feel like they should have given Dr. Hill maybe one more extra scene to poison, him against those two more than he does. That would have, I think, if you were going to change it, that would have been the change to make, something more concrete there. But what I will say about that scene, because he does at the dinner, like you're saying, he says, "Is it a good idea for him to date your daughter?" Basically, and,
I know,
and I think he comments on Herbert West as well. I don't remember.
Oh, I know. I think there's a little hint of it, but I just feel like something more concrete that he presents to. It's not a big deal anyway.
I think what they could have done too is they could have maybe brought up because he does mention that Dr. Hill is a grant machine. They could have brought if they raised that issue again, that might have made it more apparent, what the dean was thinking, or because you don't know. That's the thing. Like, there's all these possible explanations. It could be the puritanical streak. It could be because Dr. Hill is an influential money-making machine for the university, or it could be because he doesn't put up with nonsense, like, talk about bringing the dead back from
life.
But we don't know, and so it's a little bit confusing. So I tend to agree with you on that one. But
Yeah,
also like oh, go ahead.
Okay, and I have to just bring up one scene just out of the blue that just struck me as a great scene. It's the one where Hill is in the office with Megan, and and it's when her father is in the cell behind them in the padded room, through the window, and he's kind of doing his seduction move towards her, and then and then her father just bashes
Yeah.
against the window and just terrifies her and breaks the mood, and Dr. Hill just gets mad at him like you blew it, you fool, you
Which
ruined like as if he was being really successful or something, like, yeah, you totally would have gone for me if you hadn't broken the mood.
well,
It's just such a great
it
a great
shows
darkly comic moment.
it shows how out of touch his character is because he's basically
Yes,
delivering the worst news about the father possible to her and saying he
I
wants to do
know.
this exploratory surgery, and then he's trying to hit on her and like that,
Yes.
and he's trying to hit on her while he's also saying like you can come to me if you need it. It's a very it's like he's just throwing everything at her,
He
and
has no idea how to be a human being.
yeah.
Well, I think that's one of the things, and I commented on that earlier, that makes him such an interesting foil for Herbert West, who also has no idea about how to be a human being, but is slightly more successful in manipulating people.
Yeah.
See, I
Yeah.
think Herbert West knows how to be a human being, but chooses not to be, and this guy doesn't.
Maybe.
Like I feel like with Herbert West, it's like no, I'm put on Earth to reanimate dead bodies. That is what I'm here to do, and anything that interferes with that is non-essential. So I'm jettisoning it.
Yeah.
But I just get the sense that if he wanted to be the best violinist in the world, he could have been that too. It's just it's just, and there is like an odd scene early on where Dr. Hill is talking about, he's talking about, how you can't bring the dead back from life. Basically, he's talking about the 6 to 12 minutes thing and all that. And he says everybody wants a magic pill, everybody wants a beautiful afterlife, and he starts talking about how maybe it's about force of will and all this stuff. And then I think he gets interrupted by the pencil breaking or something. He gets to, but he's going into an interesting territory because it gets both into the Herbert West character and into the Hill character, where Herbert West almost by force of will is just breaking the barrier of life and death. It's just this. It's like he's just relentless in his pursuit of this, and Dr. Hill is his, I think, his only successful subject.
Reanimation,
right?
yeah. And that's the thing. Dr. Hill uniquely has, again, this kind of will that lets him retain his personality and volition after he's reanimated, even though he's just a head.
Yeah. He's the one that shouldn't
choices.
even be functioning, right? Like he's the one that it makes the least sense that he would be operational, but for some reason he is. And I think it goes back to that speech he gives about the will, and
Yeah. Yeah. I'd never considered that actually, but that is a good point.
Well, I was thinking, because, and the thing is, in the sequel, I think he has one other success, which is the bride of the Re-Animator, basically. But it's a woman he cobbles together from a patient, and they actually use the heart of Meg. That's kind of how he gets Dan on board with the whole project. Is we're going to bring Meg
tried
back.
parts before, if I recall, is his line.
Yeah, so maybe it's
Parts.
because it's parts, but I feel like it's more the will thing. But I think it's interesting.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Than the parts thing.
I do think it's just very interesting that Dr. Hill is like his only real success, and every one of the other ones is, unsuccessful. And he's sort of obsessed with the freshness, but we know that it's not just the freshness, because the Dr. Halsey is fresher than Dr. Hill, right? Like,
or right close to it, and definitely more intact.
Yeah,
and doesn't have anywhere near the amount of personality retention.
So
there's a couple of sparks, but yeah, you feel like he's just kind of going from like the core animal instinct.
Well, it's not even
like the.
Well, and I'm not even clear on what it is, because like he's just kind of sitting in the corner weeping, really. Like that's like it's not like a psychotic reaction like the other ones had. So he seems to have more of his mind, but then, and I don't know at what point he gets lobotomized either. So that would be
That's true.
But he definitely but Hill is in full command. Hill is like, immediately rebuking West. He's immediately like, "You bastard, you did this to me," and like just pounds his head
First
into the
words.
desk and tries and just sets out to take over the world right away. It's not even a thought. He just, he's still the Dr. Hill that he was in life. He's just more menacing. That's really all that's changed.
He is a little more extreme and desperate in his strategy as well. I think that probably that's because he's a head in a turkey pan.
Yeah.
This is a great Thanksgiving movie, by the way.
Well, and I love how they get you to just not even worry about the biomechanics of how any of it, like he's
the hardest one to swallow on I don't know, I hesitate to say scientific basis, but like on the basis of believability is there's a living head and a living body, and they're not attached, but they're on the same team. That doesn't make any sense, but by the time we get to it in the movie, you're like, well, okay, whatever.
And they do actually kind of try to explain it in the sequel, but the thing that I have a harder time with than that is the blood in the pan, because there's no circulation, so there's no.
Right, what's he pumping it with his jaw?
Yeah, and also when he's in the bag and he opens the bag and he breathes and says, that's better. What is he breathing into? He's got no lungs. Right? So
I know.
How was he making noise?
It could just be a phantom impulse, maybe, but like,
it seems like there's force behind it, though. Yeah, like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. But again, you don't really worry about those in the moment that you're watching it, because it's just it just seems to work somehow. So I know what else do we want to talk about here? I don't know if we've covered everything.
We talk about the very last explosive scene with every like lobotomized mind slave corpse coming up, and then just getting this horrific fight. Like in terms of like, not only was it good, like did it look good?
It looked great. I thought. I mean, again, the effects are a little bit wonky at times, but I feel like there was almost like a I don't know. There was like there was something kind of magical about the scene where there's like this plume of acidic vapor in the air, and there are these corpses, running around, and the father is holding them at bay, and you have Meg and Dan in the foreground. And it just, I don't know, it looked really stunning to me, that moment.
It's one of those movies where, metaphorically you can see the wires a lot of time, and you know exactly how they're doing a special effect, but you never care. It's like everything is done with such an intensity and love that it just carries through. It's like, I mean, a lot of the headless scenes are like that. You're like, yeah, I can see what they're doing here, but it works.
And I think the fact that it's a horror comedy really, like, when you have that much death going on against the background of comedy noise, it's almost makes it worse. It makes it more horrifying, I feel like. So, because it's like it's sort of like, it's like when the comedian dies, that type of thing. And I feel like, again, because it ends on a downer with Herbert West being something about being wrapped up in intestines like that. Just maybe it's just me because I saw it at a young age, but that to me is like it's a real interesting representation of death. Like, because you're immediate, like, it must have been the first time I ever even saw an intestine. Do you know what I mean? Like this, and but you're aware of like what the inside of the human body is and maybe how fragile it is, and that's also what's killing him. And he's just being, just in a moment, just snuffed out. And then the same thing happens to Meg. She's about to escape and she's snuffed out. So it's just this real, like, death is inevitable. There's this inevitability of death in the.
Yeah, well, I can remember watch. Oh,
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I know when I watched it as a kid back when it first came out. I mean, the ending was pretty grim for me then. I mean, obviously, I took it more seriously. I'm more jaded. I can just take it for what it is now. But I was a little unsettled at the end with that, definitely.
Well, and I think it's a good kind of unsettling. It's like a
it's an unsettling. I loved the movie.
It like makes you think. Do you know what I mean? Like there's like thought in there somewhere. But I don't know, Joel, you look like you wanted to say something, or am I misreading you?
No, I was just gassy.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I do want to say stuff, but I was going to wait for an appropriate
moment. Much like the
it.
Body that released the intestines, you were gassy.
Wait, was it gassy?
Yeah, there was a big plume. There was like a little gust of gas that came out of its chest when it opened up.
That's such a beautiful little detail.
I assume that was like bowel gas, but who knows?
Well, I mean, it's probably because it was a decomposing body, but
That's
okay.
yeah.
That's why I would assume it had gas. Oh God, but yeah, that scene, I think what you're like, and I agree with you, like tonally that it both shifts but never loses its appropriateness because it's really goofy, but has this kind of like mounting stakes and grimness as it carries on and drags all the characters into death. And there's a real like, because the short story had that too, where it was kind of like there was this sort of like poetic philosophy at the core of it, where it's like you can't really beat death. The flesh is going to take its toll and drag you back down to the underworld. And the last scene of this movie, although it is comedic and a little zany, like tonally is identical to that scene, which also is one of the weirdest scenes in the short story, where like they have like just skeletons coming back to life with no flesh on their bones and like really kind of outlandish stuff like that. But it kind of makes it border into the mythical, and I really like it as well. So that's the thing I had to say between all the gas.
Yeah, and I do like how it comes full circle with Dan, where he starts at the beginning of the movie trying to resuscitate a person, it doesn't work,
exactly.
And he's doing that with Meg, and then he uses the re-animate the reagent on her.
Yeah, we also don't get to see the outcome, but we do hear a blood-curdling shriek over the credits. So.
And one of the disappointments of the sequel is it undermines the. Obviously, that would have led to it's perfect the way it ends, because that's exactly how this movie should end. Meg screams and she's been reanimated, and who knows where that goes. And in the next movie, we're not told exactly what followed, but we know that they end up with just her heart. They don't, so she doesn't
part
end
of
up.
That was she was basically doing a soap opera when they made the second movie, so they had to work in a different actress, which led to them doing all that.
I assumed it was something like that, because it seemed like you would obviously get Barbara Crampton back in that role if you could.
Yeah, and she came back for From Beyond and stuff, so it's not like she was averse to making a sequel. She just couldn't do it. She was just busy.
But they did get everybody else back for the most part. But at least the people that were still survivable, and they retcon, I think, some of what happened to the head too, because that head gets crushed, and the head is, and also the other one little funny thing is there's that line where he says, get a job in a sideshow, I think is what he says to him. Who's going to believe a talking head? And they find the head in a circus. Like the head, it literally ends up as part of a sideshow.
He even plagiarizes the insult.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, on the whole accuracy to Lovecraft thing, I find it interesting that this is a movie where where Lovecraft purists like to get upset about it. But I find another thing in a lot of Lovecraftian movies that people get away with, which I find is more an affront to Lovecraft, is that, Lovecraft was in real life this really, really, strict atheist. He was extremely atheist, and he kind of tried to put that into all his, not all, but like most of his stories was something he tried to bring across. Like, to get into the story of Call of Cthulhu briefly, it's like, there are Cthulhu cults that worship Cthulhu and stuff, but there's never any sense Cthulhu cares about them. There's never any sense they're getting supernatural powers from them. There's never any sense they actually have any effect on Cthulhu waking up or not waking up. It's just people trying to... any of these things in Lovecraft are generally people just kind of making stuff up around this phenomena, whereas people who are Lovecraftian purists often get less upset about movies where they're actually where people can actually bring a god into the world with their ritual or something. And it's like, no, Lovecraft was actually kind of mocking that concept in his work when you get into it. And so I find it kind of funny that this movie, which is philosophically pretty dark and as comedies go, and I feel like this is actually more Lovecraftian than a lot of movies that Lovecraftian fans are okay with are, basically.
Well, I find a lot of Lovecraft fans are actually August Derleth reinterpreted Lovecraft fans,
Exactly.
and that's a very different kind of Lovecraft than the original.
Exactly.
You see my Lovecraft purism coming out there.
Yeah, because I never actually read the Lovecraft stories by other writers. I've only read the stories by Lovecraft himself.
Yeah.
And I have noticed when I talk to people about Lovecraft, there's like an expanded universe that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, nor
And
do I care to become so.
uh,
Yeah, because really, when you get down to it, Lovecraft's horror is mainly science fictional. I mean, it's kind of there's other levels of dimensions and stuff, but he's more science fictional in his work than supernatural to an extent. Supernatural things in his work are usually just some kind of weird science that's kind of beyond us, basically.
also, this is one where I feel like this kind of gets into a subject I sort of wanted to touch on, which is like, where is Arkham exactly? Because this is where it's set, and it's set at Miskatonic Medical School, right? Is that what they call it?
You're the Massachusetts guy, so we'll
Well, there is. I mean, well, so my theory is, because number one, I think a lot of people that talk about where Lovecraft's fictional places are, I don't think they really know Massachusetts that well, and they don't understand, like, it's obviously someplace, like a lot of these are someplace north of Boston in most cases. I think they're generally fictional, but I think Arkham is really Danvers and Salem. I think those are the and Danvers, for people who don't know, Danvers is Salem Village. It's the original Salem Village where the witchcraft trials happened, or where it began, and then Salem City, it's Salem Town, is like where the trials were held, and it actually encompassed the whole Essex County region. It wasn't just
that's a very Lovecraft move to know that much about history and make that kind of in joke that only a true Bostonian would know.
Well, I don't know. Yeah. Well, again, I'm sure a lot of people would disagree. I'm just one person. I want to be clear, but I was looking at a map of Lovecraft's sketch of Arkham. Mm-hmm. And it looks a lot. There's a river. I think it's like North River. It might used to have been Nomkeg River that separates Beverly and Salem. And across the river is Water Street. And I used to do delivery in Beverly. Across the river in Beverly is Water Street. Do you know what I mean? And there's also, and if you go down further, you see that there's the Witch House. And in Salem, there's the Witch House. In Salem, is one of the victims of the witch trials. His house is sort of, it's become like a almost like a museum. And there's like a lot of other little things. And then there's the asylum that I just sent to you guys in the chat. There's the Danvers. It's got a bunch of different names. I think it's like Danvers State Hospital was what it technically was, but most people called it like the Danvers Lunatic Asylum. And if you look at a picture of this place, it looks like Arkham Asylum. It's got a real, it's got a vibe.
With Danvers. The hospital. That was where they shot Session 9. I think they shot at the hospital in Danvers. I think that's where they act. That ruined hospital in Session 9. That is the actual place that Brendan's talking about. I know Joel's seen that.
And again,
we should probably put that on the list at some point.
And Danvers is Salem Village. They just changed the name after the events because they didn't want to be associated. But so I think I feel like that might be where Arkham is supposed to be. It may be obviously it's fictional, so who there's possibly other things in there, but that, and also like a lot of times people will say like this old seaside community, and I forget there's the story where he sees the Necronomicon when he goes into the person's house, and then he goes down the steps and there's like an underground. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I can't think of the name of the story, but
I think a lot of people say things like that's supposed to be Newburyport or a place like that. I think that's Marblehead. I think, and Marblehead is really close to Salem. It's right next to it.
Yeah, I've heard Marblehead. Other people with that theory too.
Okay, so
you're not alone in that.
Yeah, it feels well because also Marblehead is like an old New England. It's like really like upper class old money type of place, and the whole thing about that town is there's like an inbreeding type thing, like an old New England inbreeding type thing. I'm not saying Marblehead is inbred, but I'm just saying that like if I had to pick a community where I would do that kind of scenario, where I'd have the old aristocratic inbred community, Marblehead might be one that I would pick like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, it has that vibe to it. But I have to say too, when I went back and read his stories maybe 5 to 10 years ago. When I read Whisper in Darkness, when the character goes out to the location in Whisper in Darkness, there's actually like this detailed travel to wherever that takes place, and it was like I remember getting out Google Earth and just like following, and I was like, yep. Yeah. He was describing. I'm like, I kind of ended up at this point way out in the middle of nowhere in like the backwoods of Massachusetts along the map. I'm like, okay, this is where we are, and yeah, it just lined up totally. So I think it is fruitful to actually, find real geographical locations for all of Lovecraft's stuff. It makes sense.
Yeah, and again, it's just just ideas. I don't know for sure, but like I definitely feel pretty confident that it would be in that area. And obviously, he was from Rhode Island, so who knows how accurate he was even being? Like,
Sure.
but yeah. So there was one other thing I wanted to get into. I think before we head out. Unless did you have something that you wanted to add, Joel? You look like you wanted to say something a moment ago, and I didn't want.
No,
to...
I just got to use the bathroom. So
Oh,
I'm just
okay,
like,
all right. Well, then we'll try to wrap it up really quickly, I suppose. So yeah, I don't know. Do you want to move on to like, final thoughts on the film? I mean, we have been going on for over an hour, so.
Yeah, I think we've probably hit the point where I'm losing stuff to say beyond just kind of glowing praise of the movie.
I was saving my whole thing about the movie being Lovecraftian, like more Lovecraftian movies people think are Lovecraftian for my final thoughts. So I've already blown my final thoughts.
Okay.
So I'm sorry.
I don't even know if I have any special final thoughts I haven't covered so far.
The one thing I do want to comment on, I guess I don't have any final thoughts because I said everything I had to say. But I did want to comment on the green solution, the reagent.
Yeah.
That color. Number one, it's like that color was in the air that year. I feel like that was the color of the time. Do you know what I mean? There was a lot of green glowing goop in movies.
Yeah, that's
and
like
toys.
the same stuff that the Teenage Mutant Turtles used.
Yeah.
Secret of the ooze.
Secret of the ooze. Yes.
It's like I was kind of baffled about how they made that particular like look, and I was like, did they just crack open a glow stick and put it in a bottle? Like, is that what that is?
It looks like a glow stick. I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it's either glow stick material or they rotoscoped it. Those are the two things that I could think of.
It doesn't look rotoscoped at all to me.
Yeah, it didn't look rotoscoped, but I was just
No.
thinking that was. But like Tron, I was thinking of how Tron looked, and I was like, well, I guess they could have done what they did with.
They had a much bigger budget. They had Disney on their
Yeah.
side. I don't
They
think
had
this movie had the technology for that level. But I do have to say I love the way the movie closes. Like you said, there's the scream, but when the movie goes dark, you still see the green goo after the whole screen's gone dark, and the syringe just slowly pushing that green goo in. That is great. That was a nice touch.
And I did want to say that I had seen the Bride, the Re-Animator ages ago, but I had not seen the third one that came out in the early 2000s. So I watched that this weekend, and that some of the interesting things about that one are he actually goes to prison, I think, for what he did in the second movie. And that's where the rest of the film.
The first movie, though. We're not sure. It could have been a number of things.
Well, no, because
no,
but I think it's right after the events of the second movie, and it's just it's very interesting to see how Herbert West conducts himself in prison. Is all I'll say. Like that. That's one reason to see that movie is just to see how he handles himself behind bars, and But anyways, yeah. So I don't think this is one that you can see for free. I think Re-Animator you have to rent, right, to see it on Prime.
Well, actually, I got a free trial with Shudder that let me see it, and actually, I've done that a few times where Shudder's been like, "Have another free trial."
Okay,
I really should give them my $5.99 because there's a lot of great movies on that service.
Yeah, I think I should probably get on Shudder if we keep doing this because I think I would have already paid for itself on rental.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right about that. But it's worth the $3 or $4 or whatever it is. It's a classic movie, and I don't know. It's up there with to me it's like up there with like Return of the Living Dead and films like that. Like it just is that kind of a film, and probably a little bit smarter than Return of the Living Dead. Despite all of its brains. So with that. We'll head out. We'll be back with another episode. What are we doing next? Do we have another schlock film lined up? And again, I know that we're kind of being a little bit iffy with the schlockness here.
Yeah,
but,
these have all been really high quality movies so far. I feel like we may have failed in finding
no, I
schlock.
think we could recast it as like cream of the schlock or something. Do you know what I
Cream
mean?
of the
Cream of the schlock.
schlock.
Yeah, I think that's what we're gonna have to do. This is that because we've been covering really high level schlock. Do you know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
that's the way
Yeah.
to
Oh
go.
no, the stuff is the next one, isn't it?
Yeah, we
Oh,
are
the
supposed to do the
stuff.
stuff.
Oh yeah, we gotta
Which
do the
is funny.
stuff.
I just have to say, when I finished watching this on Prime, Prime always brings up that next movie it wants to autoplay. It was The Stuff. It literally tried to play The
Yeah,
Stuff for me. I was
it
like,
knows. They know.
wonderful.
They know what we're about at Prime.
Yeah, yeah.
So we will head out, and I guess we'll be back with the stuff, or I don't know, maybe we'll have to get into the December movies though. So we might have to put, I don't know, we'll see what happens. There's a lot of movies vying for December, and so until next time, we will talk to you later.